If you resonated with any of these things, you are not being kind, you're probably being a doormat. Okay, hi everybody. Thanks for coming back if you've been here before, or hi, welcome if you're new. My name's Mickey, I'm a therapist, and we talk about therapy things on this channel. And today we're talking about people pleasing because y'all have asked me to talk about it, and also because I'm the CEO of the company. I have lots of thoughts about this. So we're gonna go over what people pleasing is technically, like what's under that umbrella, and then why are we doing that and how do we not do that? So get a snack. Sit down. We have lots of things to cover today. First of all, let's talk about what is people pleasing, right? Like technically what's considered people pleasing, because sometimes technically people pleasing, there's not like an official definition, right? But generally it's the thing where we kind of disappear ourselves, right? We are attempting to be nice or, to be like supportive, to compromise with other people, but it's at our own detriment. That's kind of the key thing here, is that it's not just being nice. This is not just the thing where we're like going with the flow and we like genuinely don't care about the outcome. This is the thing where we pretend that we don't care at our own cost. So sometimes it's the thing where like maybe we are actually just trying to be nice. Like our friend had a bad day, and we don't talk about our bad day because they just beat us to the punch when we talk about our days, right? Maybe it's the thing where we're trying to like avoid rejection, where, our first date chose a restaurant that we really don't want to go to, but we agree to go to that restaurant because we want them to like us. And so now all of a sudden we pretend like we like that restaurant. And sometimes it's the thing where we're trying to avoid conflict, right? This happens a lot. Like maybe we're agreeing to buy a generic brand ranch instead of Ken's Steakhouse Ranch because that's obviously the superior product. But we just don't want to fight about it today. We're just not in the mood, or we're scared of having a conflict about that. So we just kind of shut our mouths and eat an inferior ranch product. So there's lots of reasons that we might be doing this. But at the core, again, really what's happening is that we are choosing to cut off our own needs, even though that doesn't really feel good because we're trying to please other people, obviously. Okay, so let's talk about some ways that this is going to show up for you practically in your life. Like I said, obviously there's going to be some level of like self-censure or self-erasure here, but sometimes the things that we talk about as people pleasing, like the sort of stereotypical examples, don't really cover the whole picture of it, especially if you're a person who's been subjected to misogyny, because we like normalize a lot of these behaviors as though they're like the moral and nice thing to do, and actually they suck. So a couple of questions. Do you have the tendency to feel guilty in taking up space? This is a big one, right? Do we feel weird or bad in talking about ourselves or asking for help, especially, or expressing your opinion even when people ask you for it? You might feel kind of uncomfortable, especially if that opinion doesn't align with what somebody else or like everyone in the room thinks. Do you feel guilty about that? Do you feel weird about that? Do you need approval from other people? So much so that you almost don't even really know what you like or what you think about yourself because you're thinking so often about what other people think of you. Or do you do the thing where you chameleon your way through life, right? Your friends like this band, and even though you don't really like their music, you say that you do because you just really are uncomfortable with being an outlier in that situation. Sometimes also this is the thing where, are you finding yourself being like the court jester funny guy where you're like very entertaining and you're very light and you're very fun and cool and cutesy, and then you have a breakdown in private, in the privacy of your own home because you're emotionally depleted and overwhelmed, or maybe there's just like a lot of shit going on, but you struggle to be honest about that. So you're this like larger than life funny haha person? Or do you keep a mental piggy bank of the relationships in your life in terms of like favors equaling friendship or approval or kindness, right? So like I'm gonna tip well so that the wait staff thinks that I'm a good person. Or I'm going to make sure that I bring the best gift to the White Elephant Secret Santa thing because I want everyone to think that I'm a good person or want everyone to like me, or I want them to invite me again. Or are you doing the thing where you're always helping your friends so that you feel like you're allowed to ask for favors in return, right? I have to give something before I am allowed to ask to get something. Along with that, are you a person who has a bad time with boundaries, right? This is a pretty classic one. Do you have a struggle with implementing them, with maintaining them, or with feeling like comfortable with boundaries generally? Another one that is like a very common like misogynistic thing is finding yourself being the mom friend, right? Are you the mom friend? Are you the caretaker of the group? Do people assume that you are the de facto go-to person to take care of other people, to soothe other people, to keep track of other people, to fix other people's fuck-ups? Especially if you're noticing that you're the person who tends to caretake rather than be caretaken, this can be that, right? Or do you push yourself past a reasonable limit when trying to be supportive of other people, or especially to avoid confrontation? So this is the thing where like we're using our last little bit of gas to take somebody somewhere because we feel weird about saying no. Are we still continuing to offer support even though our life is falling apart? Are we working on weekends, working long hours, working overtime even though we really don't want to, or we don't have the space to, we don't have the time or the bandwidth to, but we just don't know how to say, no, I'm not going to do that? Are we also doing the thing where we're walking on eggshells with people who are assholes to you, right? We don't really know how to be like, hey, so you're an asshole, please stop doing that. And along with that, are we doing the thing where we're making excuses for the asshole for treating you like shit when other people are like, hey, that person's kind of an asshole to you? And you're like, well, it's not their fault because, blah, 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 blah. And are we telling the person who's an asshole to you, no, it's totally fine, it's okay, even when they apologize to you and give you kind of an opening to be like, yes, no, you're actually being kind of an asshole because we don't know how to be honest about the fact that they're an asshole? If you resonated with any of these things, you are not being kind, you're probably being a doormat. And I'm not saying that to be mean, right? I want to be clear that I'm not doing this out of like malice, but it's important for us to just be honest about what it is that's happening here, because there's a key distinction between being kind and being nice. And people pleasing often involves a desire to be nice or to be seen as nice. We're going to get into like why that happens, like deep within where that's coming from. But in order for us to address the question of like, how do we fix this? We have to get clear about what it is first, right? And part of that is being very honest about it with ourselves and with each other in a non-judgmental, non-shaming way, but in a clear, honest way. Spoiler, people pleasing is often the result of trauma, right? It can happen for other reasons, right? Life is complex and people are filled with nuance. And for the sake of an easily digestible YouTube video, sometimes, most of the time, people pleasing is the result of trauma. It's basically like the fawn response, right? If you're not familiar, there's like the fight or flight thing. There's also freeze. There's also fawn. In theory, especially in an environment where, like, let's say we're a child and our parent is abusive, we learn how to be complimentary and soothing to the person who's abusing us, right? Especially if we grew up in traumatic homes, volatile homes, very like conflict wrought or overwhelming homes, we will develop an uncanny knack for being able to sniff out other people's emotions, their needs and their wants. So much so sometimes that we're able to meet those needs or expectations before somebody even verbalizes them to us. And that can mean then that in adulthood, we grow up to be these people who try to people please and soothe and caretake everybody around us, because that feels like it's our innate expectation and also a way that we're trying to create safety and security in our lives and the world around us. This means then that we become people who, in sensing any little bit of turbulence, we learn how to soothe and smooth things over and unruffle feathers and caretake people, right? And that makes us very likable, except that it's making you likable to the wrong people. Because let's be very clear about that. Anybody who likes you primarily because you abandon yourself in order to be there for them is an asshole. Those people suck, they're exploiting you, and there's not really a lot of room for nuance in that take, because anybody who, again, is primarily in your life because they enjoy or benefit from sucking the life out of you is a fucking dick, and you don't want to be in a relationship with them. You don't deserve to be in relationship with people who are primarily interested in your companionship because they want to suck the life out of you. That sucks. That said, that doesn't mean that this is your fault though, right? Let's be very clear about that. This is not a shaming space. And especially knowing that people pleasing is often the result of trauma, it's not helpful to do the thing where we're like, wow, I suck for agreeing to be in relationship with people who are sucking the life out of me, because it's a reflex, right? Especially when it comes from a traumatic place, we learn how to do this in such a way that it becomes automatic. right? Sometimes we're not even really aware that we're doing it, which is why people pleasing is such a hard thing to unlearn, because it just like comes out of you, it feels very natural. So the process in unlearning that is going to take some time. It's going to take some trial and error. And a lot of that is going to involve making our unconscious reflexive behaviors more conscious and overt. So because sometimes people pleasing is the result of trauma from very conflict heavy homes or very like abusive homes, that can mean that we become like emotional bloodhounds, right? But sometimes it's because we have like a self-esteem issue, and that is often the result of trauma too, but a different flavor. So if we don't really feel great about ourselves, we're not super settled or comfortable with our identity, that can mean that we sort of mirror the identities of the people around us in an attempt to find approval, and also sometimes to just like fly under the radar, especially if you had abusive parents who picked at you for every single little thing and thought and opinion and belief that you had. Sometimes we learn how to just become the people around us to try to disappear. This is why I said at the beginning, people pleasing is often disappearing ourselves or censoring ourselves. This is very much that, right? So if we don't feel great about ourselves and we're trying to chameleon our way through life, this can mean that when we're interacting socially, if our friend likes hiking, we like hiking. If our boyfriend hates Italian food, guess what? So do we, And if somebody that we admire or like is a big Quentin Tarantino fan, then we're a fucking aficionado about, I don't know, Pulp Fiction. I don't even know if that's a Quentin Tarantino film, but whatever. You get the point. The thing is that we're sort of mirroring the personalities and the likes and dislikes of people around us because we have found historically, usually this is like reinforced in adolescence and early adulthood, that that's a way to get people to like us. Spoiler, this is like a sort of unrelated tangent, but psychologically, the thing that people like most often in social interactions is to talk about themselves. So if we're people who mirror other people's likes and dislikes, then they like you a whole lot, usually because they like themselves or they like talking about themselves. So this is why it tends to be a pretty compelling behavior strategy, because it works, right? Except that it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel very good. It doesn't leave a lot of space for your own identity development or expression. And it also is very anxiety provoking. It can mean then that, first of all, we end up in the situation where it's a very tangled web that we weave, right? Maybe we forget that we told somebody that we also hate Italian food, and then we order Italian food and we're like, whoops, well, that's very uncomfortable, right? But also because it can be a very complicated facade to keep up, right? So generally across the board, this is not going to be great. And it can be just like, generally, it's not going to feel good. There is also an aspect of this that is an avoiding abandonment thing, right? Especially if that happened literally or figuratively in our childhood. Our most primitive survival brain is like, great, so that's never happening again. We're going to ensure that people don't abandon us. And so we can do that by, again, mirroring the people around us, or by just generally being a people pleaser, trying to kind of avoid rocking the boat or creating conflict. And speaking of conflict, another aspect of people pleasing can be that we are soothing, smoothing, abandoning ourselves, because conflict can feel very scary, especially if you grew up in a home where there was a lot of very volatile and emotionally overwhelming conflict. That's traumatizing to a small child, right? Especially because when we're little, our brains are not equipped to deal with the complexity of human relationships and emotions. And so if our parents or our guardians or just people around us were like getting into the weeds all the time, our little child brain is like, oh, everyone around me is mad because of me. We don't really have any other way to conceptualize that experience other than, surely there's something wrong with me. And so that makes us very likely in adulthood to try to avoid being the problem, except that you were never the problem, right? Obviously, but try telling your lizard brain that. It's very difficult to do. So what we do is try to avoid conflict at any and all costs, meaning that we will avoid expressing our opinion or voicing our thoughts or getting ourselves into situations where anything that we might say, do, feel, think, exhibit could be contrary to somebody around us, in the event that that potentially turns into a conflict. Sometimes this is so compelling that even like the suggestion of potential conflict can feel like abandonment or like someone being mad at us. And so we freeze up, we freak out, and we don't really know how to navigate through that situation, because the idea of conflict is so incredibly alarming to our most, primal survival instincts. For what it's worth, also, sometimes the inverse is true. If you grew up in a home where there was no conflict modeled for you whatsoever, then the idea of conflict is also very scary, because you're like, what the fuck do I do with that, right? Especially if somebody is a very comfortable with conflict person, then that person trying to initiate a conflict with you, not out of anger or abuse even, but just trying to have a discourse about I think this, you think that, we don't agree, can feel everyone's mad at me and I don't know what to do with that. And so I want to disappear, right? So we're just yeah, I agree with you, in order to try to make that go away. And so that is kind of at the core of all of these causes, which is that your most primal brain, your survival brain, there's a little part of your brain, we're not going to get into the neuroscience. There's a primal part of your brain that in having survived those situations is absolutely not, right? We're never doing that again. We're avoiding that at all costs. And so it recognizes that these situations can potentially poke at a very core and sensitive wound. And then we develop the workaround to avoid that, which is essentially people pleasing. So in asking the question, how do we stop doing this? It's not just as simple as stop it, which is weirdly a lot of the advice that exists on the internet, which really bothers me as a clinician. This is the thing when you have clinical anxiety and people are like, well, have you tried just not being so anxious about it? Yes, yes, we have, and it doesn't work. So thank you very much for that bullshit ass advice. So I want to talk a little bit about how to actually stop doing this, right? Before we do that though, I do want to be super clear. In trying to heal people pleasing, it's important that we do it from a place of compassion and kindness for ourselves, right? I tell my clients this all the time. You can't get rid of a part of your mental illness or dysfunction or whatever from a place of hatred, right? If we enter the proverbial library that is our brain with a flamethrower, that doesn't go well, right? We have to carefully and kindly go through the volumes on all of these shelves and with love say, thank you very much, but you're going to the thrift store, right? This is no longer helpful here. So we're just going to move that one along. So I want to encourage you to do that work from this place. Having obviously your own therapist can be very helpful with that. Links are always in the description to find accessible, affordable therapy resources. So curating that plan for your own individual circumstances is going to be very important. And generally, please try to be nice to yourself. People pleasing is often from a place of people were mean to you, or you were traumatized, or people didn't give you the affirmation and the support and the validation that you deserved. So you get to do that for yourself now, right? So what we need to address here at the most basic level is your survival brain, right? It's overriding your logical brain. That's what we do in moments of survival. When we're experiencing a trauma reactivation, our frontal lobe is where our brain clicks it off basically, because it's no, we don't need that. We're in survival mode. And so that part of your brain is then making the decisions about your behavior and your feelings and whatever, which is not helpful, right? It's a useful survival instinct in the event that we're being attacked by a grizzly bear. But that means sometimes that voicing our opinion about a movie or a show feels like we're surviving a grizzly bear. And so that's not super helpful. So we need to figure out how to turn our logical brain, frontal lobe brain, back on. The unfun truth is that the way to do that, there's a couple of ways that we can go about that. None of them are super fun or super easy. There are no quick fixes for people pleasing. So I'm very sorry if you watched up to this point in the video looking for a life hack, but there are none. The truth is that it's going to take a minute, right? Which is why it's important to be nice to yourself. Some of the things that we can explore though, first of all, are going to be making the unconscious, the unspoken, more conscious, right? Because again, your primal brain is taking the wheel. We need to figure out how to verbalize to ourselves, oh, I feel unsafe right now, right? Or maybe we don't have to say this in the moment, or you can. Honestly, I'm a big fan of just being honest with the people that we love, that I am feeling compelled to tell you that I like this thing, but I don't like it, right? That's okay. Sometimes I encourage my clients also, when we do the reflex of yes, I also love asparagus. If we recognize that we have lied in that moment from a place of people pleasing, it's okay to be I don't know why I said that. That's not true. I think I am just nervous about you not liking me or finding me annoying if I say that I don't like asparagus, but I really don't like that actually. So maybe we can order something else. That's perfectly okay. There's nothing wrong with acknowledging that like I'm in process right now. So while I want to be able to be honest from the jump, sometimes we're just not, and that's fine. That also doesn't make you a bad person, by the way. Sometimes we gaslight ourselves into saying like, I'm a pathological liar because we're people pleasing. You're not. You're probably not. Seek your own therapy advice, right? That's an individual thing. And when we do the thing where we shame ourselves for something that is actually a trauma response, it's not helpful. Something else that can be very helpful with unlearning people pleasing is exposure therapy, basically. Obviously, this is something we're going to need to seek clinical help around. And sometimes what we need to practice is repeated exposure to a stimuli that makes us uncomfortable and choosing consciously like the opposite of what our typical impulse is. Opposite action is a DBT technique that can be very helpful with this. We're not going to get into the nitty-gritty of that, but basically it's practicing naming the emotion, expressing some awareness and some compassion around that emotion, and then taking a pause to survey, like, how do I want to move forward from here, right? And then choosing the opposite of the thing that we would typically do. So in a situation where we might feel very fearful of initiating a conflict or engaging in a conflict when we're invited into one, we name what we're feeling. We ask ourselves, like, what is it that's coming up for me right now? What emotions are being evoked by this circumstance? And then get curious about where that emotion is coming from, right? Do I feel afraid of this because it reminds me of being a child and where, my parents were fucking assholes to me? Or am I anxious about being disliked because I was bullied as a child? Am I fearful about my partner breaking up with me and abandoning me because maybe if I say no to this thing that they really love doing, they won't love me anymore? Explore where that's coming from and express some compassion for that wound. Practice validating that, like, yes, of course I'm afraid of that, right? Because there's this deep-seated thing inside of me that feels really bad. So of course I feel shitty around this thing, and it's okay for me to have that response. Once we get more comfortable with those steps, then we can practice some coping around that, right? We want to bring our logical brain back online, and then we can proceed from a frontal lobe place about what our response is going to be from a, I don't want to be a people pleaser place. The unfun truth about all of this also is that mindfulness is going to be a really helpful practice here. In case you didn't know, I am a meditation hater, but mindfulness can be a useful practice in this regard because it's essentially the practice of being grounded in our body in present moment, right? What am I feeling? What sensations are associated with that emotion? Where am I experiencing that presently in my body, et cetera, et cetera. So while that can be really difficult to do, it is, generally speaking, going to be pretty helpful in the practice of like not being ruled by our reflexive reptile brain. Also, to be clear, when I use that term, it's like a often recycled phrase in the therapy community about the most primal instinctual part of our brains. I know there's a lot of conspiracy theories about reptiles, and that's not what that is, to be clear. What I'm referring to is like your most basic primal instinct. Anyways, ideally, the practice of all of these things is going to be best practice with safe people, right? So in trying to unlearn people pleasing, having people who love you and are kind to bounce these things off of, who can say like, oh, okay, that's fine, right? I like hiking, but you don't have to like hiking. That doesn't matter. So we'll just do something else. Like, thanks for telling me. Why don't we curl up on the couch and watch a movie instead? That's going to help your brain to rewire the neural pathways that currently exist to a place that's like, oh no, wait, it's safe for me to say, I hate your hobbies. I don't want to do a puzzle, right? It helps to inform our brain that no is not a dangerous thing to say, or that conflict is not a dangerous thing to say. That said, we can still do that if we're being the safe place for ourselves. We don't necessarily need people to practice this, but like I said, it can be helpful. Another key part of this is going to be affirmation that the emotions of other people are not our responsibility. I know that it's well-meaning and a lot of people do this, but I want to discourage people from the reassurance thing of like, no one's mad at you for saying that you don't enjoy their favorite movie. I don't know why I keep talking about movies. You get it. Because sometimes they are, right? And especially if you have people in your life currently who are benefiting from your lack of ability to advocate for yourself, those people might actually get mad. Those people might actually get mad, but that's not because their emotions are your responsibility. That's because those people suck, because people are often benefiting from your exploitation, and so they get mad when you cut off their supply. So I want to encourage people to try and avoid the thing where we say to ourselves, no one will ever be upset at me for advocating for myself, because sometimes they might, but that doesn't mean that that's your problem, though. It's not our responsibility as a grown adult to enable the dysfunctional behaviors of other people. Let them get mad. Let them be mad. But practice creating some safe distance for yourself and recognize that when people get mad, that sometimes it's like a little bit of a death rattle in those relationships. Just because my dog might throw a tantrum that she's not allowed to eat onion rings doesn't mean that I should give her the onion rings, right? Like, as an adult, I recognize that while I would love to make her happy, I can't do that though, right? And so just because somebody is throwing a fit doesn't mean you have to give them what they want or that you are bad for not giving them what they want. Again, I just want to be clear that anytime that people pitch a fit about you drawing a line in the sand, it's usually because they were benefiting from your suffering, and those people suck. You don't owe those people anything. And it's also not your obligation to read the minds of others or to abandon yourself for the convenience of others. You deserve to be in relationship with people who value you and who love you and who, like, sure, maybe they'll be a little wounded if you don't want to play D&D with them, but that doesn't mean that you have to do those things, right? Like, you're allowed to say no, and you deserve to sort of clean house, dust the cobwebs out, because those people should move along and also seek help. So be kind to yourself around this. If you guys have further questions about how to unlearn people pleasing, let me know. There's actually a lot to be said about the Venn diagram between people pleasers and neurodivergent folks, especially in regard to like autistic masking, etc. So let me know if you have other questions about that. There's lots to discuss here, so I'm happy to make a video about that if you want. In the meantime, if you like the video, you should like it, and it helps the channel. You can also subscribe because we do stuff like this and pop culture stuff that I would love to have you stay for. Come hang out with us on stream on Friday, and then share the video to help the channel grow and to help each other grow, and I will see you guys next Saturday. Okay, bye.